Hi, welcome back to God Laughs at Dirty Jokes, book reading number 14. Holy smoly! Yeah, so we're up to chapter 29, which is called Suffering and Empathy. And I just had a really cold drink with ice cubes, so it's like my mouth is frozen and I can't talk right. So I'm sure you really wanted to know that, and bear with me if I smudge my first words together. Okay. Suffering and Empathy, chapter 29. Ready? Okay. Thankfully, I've never been in combat or had to kill someone to survive, but I know what being close to the bottom feels like. Millions or billions of people have been overwhelmed by life and contemplated suicide, and plenty have succeeded. Living through low times and coming out the other side smiling is like surviving a near-death experience and getting a second chance at life. I'm grateful. I hope to take advantage of it for a long time. Most people who feel suicidal don't want to die. They feel powerless and don't want to be in pain anymore and can't envision things ever getting better. The feeling can be so black, it makes the future seem impossible. What often helps a person out of the hole is the passing of time and a change of perspective, plus counseling, medication, and or family support. Some people manage to hang on long enough to outgrow the feeling of extreme despair. What follows may not be happiness exactly, but a safe harbor where you can catch your breath. If you rest there long enough and the daily panic gradually subsides, you might imagine a day will come when you'll feel good. Then one comes. Even though you fear allowing yourself to feel hopeful, it's followed by another good day soon after. Then the better days start to rival the bad ones in frequency, and you find yourself less focused on sadness. A change is gradually occurring that you may not notice until years later. Then you look back and realize how far you've come and how much you've improved. You feel like a different person, and you literally are, right down to your cells. Every cell in the body has a finite lifespan and is eventually replaced by a new one. With 75 trillion cells, it takes 7 years for a person to become completely new biologically. There are many references to the number 7 in Christianity, from the 7 days of Genesis to 7 seals of Revelation. In Scripture, 7 supposedly symbolizes completeness or perfection, though I'm reluctant to endorse any religious text. At age 43, I guess I've started my 7th cycle of 7 years. So that's the age I was when I wrote it. Now, I'm 50, and I turned 49 in 2020, in February 2020, just as COVID was getting going. So I completed my 7 cycles of 7 years, and at the beginning of my 8th cycle, for me personally, the world turned to shit. So those first 7 cycles of 7 years were definitely smoother. So I don't know what that means, if anything, but take that for whatever it means or is worth. Okay. It's no surprise that many veterans suffer from depression. Military suicides are way up because we've been in a near constant state of war since the invasion of Afghanistan. Don't even mention Iraq. As far as I'm concerned, George Bush and especially Dick Cheney are war criminals for starting a war under false pretenses and manufactured intelligence. When you're trained to kill like an emotionless machine, the essence of your humanity is suppressed and compromised. Being rewarded for the successful destruction of other human beings is an enormous contradiction to overcome once you exit the service. Recently, I had the opportunity to help a young veteran get through an angry moment. It happened late on a Saturday hip-hop night at a bar on Allen Street, half a block from my home. I've been going for years to booze and dance, though I'm one of the older people now. Now I'm even older. Great. Wonderful. I stood inside their small fenced-in patio, handing out postcards for a jazz hip-hop show I was promoting across town. The band was the Robert Glasper Experiment, who later won a Grammy. I'd been at it an hour and a half and had a few drinks. Most of the young white kids going inside didn't give a shit about the show, but it's a percentages game. Give out a few thousand postcards and hope you get a 5 to 10% return, and don't take the 90% rejection personally. The most enthusiastic responses were from black patrons who were also the happiest looking people. By 1 a.m., the crowd was several drinks deep. A thin, muscular woman of about 25 with straight brown hair and a tight ponytail, in jeans and a button white shirt with little makeup, yelled over the patio railing at a tall, overweight young man who had his back turned to her. The man's two female friends looked on helplessly. When I turned towards them, one of them said to me, "She's nuts. She just came up and started yelling at him." The young woman's name is Ginny. So, of course, that's not her real name. She stood outside the patio, leaning on the railing with a plastic cup in her hand. Water or vodka? Probably the latter. Her eyes and gestures were wild. She's an Iraq war veteran. My inhibitions were low from the beers. From personal experience, I instantly recognized someone in great pain. I engaged her. Ginny's combat experiences caused obvious damage. She was traumatized by all of the killing and by the gruesome deaths of several of her colleagues. And then this is a quote from her. "People have no idea what it's like to see your friend die with blood coming out of their eyes." She admitted she harassed the overweight guy because she despised what she perceived as his softness and naivete. She was angry at nearly everyone there because she considered them clueless and shallow, and many probably were. While she was in Iraq getting shot at, they were back here partying. Ginny resented that they could not know what she did, that life can be brutal and things are so bad in some seemingly cursed places that 9-year-olds are pushed into a cocaine habit to warp them into child soldiers who will shoot at enemy soldiers. American prosperity has insulated us from much suffering. Another reason I don't always trust an entitled American perspective about the world, though I love my country. I'll never comprehend Jenny's experiences, but I related to her resentment. In the not-so-distant past, I used to get angry at nearly everyone around me for failing to acknowledge the fragility of life and being unwilling to pursue a more enlightened existence, the way I felt I had. When I perceived pettiness, it would set me off. But self-righteous anger is ultimately consuming, and it blinds you from seeing much of the goodness in people. That's really true. When you get on your own high horse, then in a way you're not so much better than the people you're judging. Ginny needed to vent. Her hurt appeared deep. At first she was foaming, but my mellowness seemed to calm her. Her face changed from wild-eyed like a hurt animal to softer and more in control as she understood I wasn't judging her and didn't consider her crazy. I told her that it isn't tongue-tied today. I told her that it isn't satisfying, but that the dumb young people at the bar almost weren't to blame for their immaturity. They could have no idea why she'd become so angry. They would probably never know, and of course it was grossly unfair. Ginny said she was glad they had been spared what she'd seen. I suggested she probably chose the young man as a target because she perceived him as easy, like low-hanging fruit. Even if he was an underachiever, Ginny was simply passing on her self-loathing. Maybe he had a rich inner world, and if we put ourselves in his shoes, we'd see him differently. But in that moment of anger, she found him disgusting. She said the military would never let him get or stay that fat. She'd become disciplined and tough, but intolerant. Her empathy was understandably diminished, like mine. I said he probably wasn't happy to be fat. Janie said that in the Army, a woman has only two options, to toughen up or to become a repeated rape victim. She had clearly decided to embrace her aggression and not be victimized. It felt parallel to my high school decision to fight my way through life without apology. We are both guilty of overcompensation. It's harder to dial back aggression once you've discovered its effectiveness, and if one's choices are to be savage or to fight, fighting will win. You can lose touch with the better side of yourself, though. We need tenderness, too, and it can be hard to preserve without feeling like a sucker. Sucker? Ginny passed on her hurt, but she admitted it didn't make her feel better about herself. I understood why she felt that way, but it still wasn't okay. I said it wouldn't stop the cycle of anger, only perpetuate it. She agreed. Of course, because I'm speaking from experience. That's it. That's the only reason. I ain't better. 15 minutes earlier, I had observed Ginny on the dance floor with two different women. I assume one was her girlfriend because she made a reference to her outside. Before we met, my impression was that she was forceful, possibly desperate. I noticed the body language between her and the women. Ginny wanted to get more physical and was trying to initiate contact. Forceful men try this all the time with women at clubs. But each woman was uncommitted physically, turned slightly away from her. Body language. I imagined other aspects of her life. She was having trouble with relationships since her return because she needed a lot of emotional support from other people, but was perhaps too aggressive in trying to get it, as I was. It easily causes miscommunication or discomfort. People shy away when they sense a combination of neediness and anger. There was no way many of the people in her life could see things as she does now. Ginny was eventually discharged by the military when she broke her leg and literally could no longer walk. She would have served another tour of duty otherwise. I said that although a broken leg is a serious injury, perhaps it was meant to happen so that she didn't have to return. She agreed, which I do believe in this case. I said it might take years to work through her anger, but that she would be okay in time. I sincerely believed it. I thought that a therapist could be helpful because they're not supposed to be your friend. They're paid to listen without judgment. She didn't think the VA would be much help. I said I didn't know, but if that was true, she needed to find help outside the system. She needed to do whatever she had to help herself because no one else can. We talked for about 15 minutes. Then she said, "Let's go do a shot." We walked inside together, energized by the emotional connection, and did a celebratory shot at the crowded bar. We hugged. I said I knew she'd be okay in time. She ran off to rejoin her friends. Ginny helped me too. When I arrived, I was feeling disconnected, but the conversation snapped me out of it. Funny how, when others need us, we're sometimes able to shelve or sort our own problems. The room seemed friendlier than before. I felt like I was glowing. I even began to feel flirtatious and tried making eyes at a few women in the bar. I didn't feel any immediate connections, but then two African American women I've never met ran over and gave me random hugs, which made me smile. Is joyful energy that radiant and obvious that we want to run up and grasp it? We recover from devastations. We don't need to suffer indefinitely, and we won't. If we can ride out tough periods, even just treading water, in time we feel differently about our situation. Surviving the feelings at the bottom is all we need to do for the moment, which is maybe apt, especially in the COVID year. Sometimes it's best to keep it simple and make your goal just getting through the day. If I had the power, I would probably try to fix anyone in pain. Suffering has troubled me since I was very young, partly but not entirely because of my brother's physical issues. My feelings were magnified as an alienated teen and adult. My mom's family experiences are mixed in too. But if you or I were able to prevent someone's suffering, would it really be a favor, or might it rob them of critical experience? That's such a difficult question to answer sometimes. When we witness anguish on a large scale, as when countries are at war, we wonder what, if anything, we can do to help people halfway around the world we don't even know. Why won't someone make it stop? Why doesn't God intervene? Unfortunately, there's practically no limit to the depth of suffering some must endure. But if suffering had built-in limitations imposed by God, then so too would powerful happiness be necessarily limited. Without some misery, we wouldn't know the difference between deep pain and joy, or have an opportunity to create ourselves by choosing between courage and cowardice. Powerful transforming bliss is available. It's waiting to wrap its arms around us to transform the everyday into the extraordinary. The world is a dangerous place, but we can be brave enough to empathize and love. Protecting the innocent and weak is one of the noblest instincts, even though it can place a courageous person in peril. When we do as much as we're able, then we can live with our choices and maintain self-respect, even if we don't achieve our goals or fail to fully protect others from harm. We inch closer to heaven. As I finished editing this chapter on my second floor porch, a gospel band played out of sight, blocks away. Their sound deep and celebratory in the early July evening air. The singer just let out a fantastic James Brown wail that mirrors the way I feel inside. Life can be sweet. That is the conclusion of chapter 29. Suffering and empathy. And our other chapter today will be chapter 30, which is called Black Waves. And I'll tease this chapter by saying that if you find this chapter interesting, I have the sequel to it ready for book number 2. So Black Waves Part 2. Okay, get ready. My friend John saw black waves of evil in the air. Okay, so white light protection for me, for you, for anybody watching, for everybody watching, for everybody anywhere. White light protection. Keep us in the pure healing and protective white light of God while we wander into the Black Waves chapter. My friend John saw black waves of evil in the air. John's a full-time musician living outside of New York City. He teaches private music lessons in Manhattan, going from one apartment complex to another. Like me, John's a sensitive. He's always had an interest in and awareness of the supernatural. In October 2012, almost 10 years ago already, John was teaching at the apartment building where Dominican-born nanny Yoselin Ortega allegedly murdered 2 young children in her care. During the lesson, he heard commotion and sirens outside and went down to the lobby fearing a fire had started. When the door to the elevator opened, he experienced a chaotic scene and a police cordon. He asked the doorman, who was noticeably shaking, what happened? The disturbed man said, the nanny killed those kids. John heard a woman, the mother, screaming in agony. Her cries were the worst shrieks, nearly inhuman, that he's ever heard. John had the sensation that time had broken down. People seemed to be moving in slow motion, and everything felt unreal, as if he was watching a movie. Psychologists call this a dissociative experience. The bodies of the children lay wrapped in white sheets on a yellow-framed stretcher. He could feel the darkness like a chill in the air, and when he looked up, he saw black waves circling above the bodies of the children. Spooky apparitions which soon departed. John thought he might be hallucinating, but whatever was occurring, he felt he was in the presence of pure evil, and I believe him. John found himself standing only a few feet behind the traumatized mother. She moaned, holding her only living child tightly in her arms. She swayed back and forth uncontrollably, and sometimes she would look up to the ceiling and utter something indecipherable to God. This seemed to last forever. Eventually, a calm, white-haired detective placed a large white handkerchief over mother and child and escorted them to an ambulance. Shortly thereafter, John left the scene amidst a media frenzy. The incident left him deeply troubled. In the following months, he had difficulty sleeping, suffered from nightmares, and experienced persistent involuntary flashbacks of the scene while awake. He sought the help of a therapist who identified his emotional state as post-traumatic stress disorder. A couple of months later, John woke up alarmed in the middle of the night. He felt like he was having a panic attack. In his mind, he told himself, it's coming back. The evil is coming back. The next morning, the horrific shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut took place. John had a premonition of the return of the same dark forces he had witnessed in Manhattan. I suggested that the incident at the apartment complex had temporarily sensitized him to darkness. This is something that they love, for us to be aware of their power and afraid of them. Our courage and hope and belief in the dominance of love are our best weapons, especially when wielded calmly without anger or hatred. John and I have a habit of getting into lengthy text message exchanges. A few months later, he wrote me a message in several parts. This is John's text. I saw a ghost of a woman sitting at my dining room table last night as I walked up the driveway. Thought it must be Amanda, his wife, John's wife. But she was in bed. It was very late. Peaceful spirit, though. I didn't mind. Every now and then I have spirit sightings. Well, like perhaps once every few years. We have a very old pre-United States cemetery near our home. And he lived at the time and still does live in Cold Spring, New York, outside New York City. First Continental Army camped out where my lawn is now back in the 1780s. I feel the presence of very old spirits sometimes in my village. Seriously, where I live could very easily be used as background for Halloween-themed movies. It is beautiful, not creepy, but about as old as America gets. Old colonial fences and homes built as far back as the 18th century. Mine is a new one built in 1900. I texted back. I have no trouble believing that. In my mind, the spirit of anyone who's ever lived could pop in and out to say hello. My recent problem is making sure I stay connected to this physical world because I feel it would be very easy to trip out and disappear or fall somewhere between worlds if I contemplate it too deeply. I may be overly connected at present. Ironic that finding the truth about reality and life after death means needing to be careful not to lose touch with this world and time. John texted, most spirits that wish to make their presence known are disgruntled. She was just praying peacefully. I knew when I entered my home that she would leave. She is welcomed any time. I think I am in her space. I wrote, I've experienced many comforting spirits. They are definitely more subtle, but they can be felt fairly often. Her prayers are for you and your family and your well-being. What a kind thing. You're being watched over perhaps because she knows you have experienced the underside recently. The knowledge of darkness is hard to reconcile, but beauty and innocence wins. John wrote, we must always be careful, but being overconnected should not be an over-worry because we are all one anyway. There is no disconnect. You might make me cry. You are right about the woman coming to pray. Me, smiley face text. Sleep well, pal. Hopefully we'll all be watched over and cared for. I feel that's how it will be indeed. Cheers. John wrote, knowledge of darkness, like quoting me. I like how you phrased that. Good word choice. I wish I had never been there, Rob. He's talking about it at the Manhattan apartment building with the nanny murders. I wrote back, I know, and I think of so many people who have faced great darkness with bravery. Love's about the only recourse available. There's a ton of positive energy in love. Try to focus on all the good stuff. That woman came to help you, which is awesome, referring to the spirit in his kitchen. John wrote, thanks, pal. I appreciate your keen insights. Indeed, love is the great mitigator. Smiley face. I wrote, happy to help. It helps remind me to focus on the good stuff, too. 2 weeks passed. I heard from John again by text, and we picked up the conversation at the same spot. Never saw that spirit again, he wrote. I wouldn't mind if she came back. I wrote, just because she's unseen doesn't mean she's not around, smiley face. But since you've invited her, maybe she'll appear. John wrote, I wouldn't mind if she did. Her peacefulness was calming. She seemed pure and pious. Can these spirits ever talk? I would like to hear what her thoughts are. My dead grandfather once spoke to me. I wrote, my brother, Steve, converses with them more regularly. So the answer is yes. You could speak to her even without her seeing you, I'd imagine. Then she may be able to get back to you, in some fashion. Maybe not directly with something he could hear. John wrote, she is from so long ago. Must be easily 1700s. Not sure what to ask. I suppose just be natural. She will hopefully understand. I wrote, yep, just speak naturally. It's like any conversation. Sincerity is key, as you know. John wrote, on February 17, 2013, I put that in parentheses. On February 17th, 2013, when we were texting, I asked if she was here to communicate, the spirit in the kitchen. I was out in my back porch room smoking a butt. A few moments later, the door to inside my main house opened. Yes, it could have been wind, but it was a completely still night, and I don't recall the door ever doing this. Almost sounds like something in a damn movie. It didn't scare me or creep me out, though. It almost felt peaceful. I've always been so scared of ghosts. This one doesn't rattle me and almost feels comforting. It's new territory for me. Now, that makes so much sense that, when John is having this he's sensitized from the things he's experienced with some dark forces and troubled, and then this woman, maybe a former resident of that area or the house, comes to pray for him and his family in his kitchen. I mean, why not, right? Seriously, why not? I wrote back, a lot of people seem scared of ghosts. I've been fortunate. My big events have all been peaceful and joyful, not frightening. Fear attracts fear, and peacefulness attracts peace. If you feel good vibes and stay positive, then you should be good. I know that's hard to do sometimes. It's hard to do for me sometimes. You can find yourself in a loop in your mind where you can't get out of the thinking about the bad things instead of the really, really good things. I do it. I've done it a lot, especially in the COVID year, and then just got to break that cycle somehow, whether that's listening to your favorite music or talking to someone you love on the phone or meeting up, socially distanced or safe or however you want to do it, or if you've been vaccinated yet. You got to break through that energy, get back to your connective side somehow. Okay. So John continues. The strongest ghost encounter I had was with a man who had been murdered at point blank range, and it was an awful, frightful experience. I still shudder to recall it in my mind. This spirit was so angry. I realized that I had attracted the spirit because I was not mindful in my approach to the spirit realm. I wrote, yep, gotta respect it. Absolutely, gotta respect it. Anybody can get hung up on thinking of it as a fun thing to dabble in, like a hobby. That includes all of us. But the stakes are real, and they will definitely let us know if we get flippant. Fortunately, the darkest visitor I ever had, I treaded carefully to collect information on how they think. I don't know if you remember that chapter where I had that one visitor. Their goal is to expand suffering, but joy is way more powerful, right down to our DNA unfurling and reaching out. It's great that John and his family have someone peaceful watching them. The calmness he experienced in her presence reminds me of the powerfully positive experiences I've had. It's hard to explain to someone who's not yet experienced it that in the presence of a pure spirit there is no fear whatsoever, only clarity and deep joy. It's an incomparable feeling. Good spirits want to help us. We might think of it as a prayer, but really it's just asking for the involvement of greater goodness. It's asking God to come closer to help you and the world. Perhaps someday I'll be a spirit who helps others too. You can ask good spirits to help guide you with something specific or general, but you might not always get an immediate or obvious answer. They want to help, but sometimes they have other priorities. You might not get exactly what you want, though there's always a bigger plan. If a good spirit assists you, don't forget to say thanks. I imagine even spirits like to feel appreciated. That is the end of chapter 30, Black Waves. So that's where we're going to stop today. Thanks so much, everybody who has commented or asked questions or interacted with me in the comments section on YouTube. That's been so much fun. I really, really appreciate it. It's lovely to kick around ideas and thoughts about all this stuff with other people who are into it and open to the interesting mystery that all of life is. So I'm just I'm really grateful for those interactions and grateful to anyone who takes the time to watch these videos and listen to me spout my ideas about spirit. So I know a few of you or many of you, or at least a few of you, like my tangents. Thank you for liking my tangents. I didn't really have any today, but I'll do my best to have more tangents sometime soon. I don't know. We'll see about an all tangent video, or maybe a live video or something. I don't know. Would a live video be good? But what if only 6 people come? That would be bad. Anyway, okay, so take care of yourselves, and hope to see you for the next installment. Thanks.